44 conference championships, 53 sectionals. Left me with a couple of them in there just to keep me coaching, I think. He's also been elected to the Cross Country Hall of Fame, or Paavo Consolidated School Systems Hall of Fame. He's written his first book entitled Move Your Chair, which he calls the Guide for Everyday Excellence. I think most of you know that Rick is the Dean of Distance Coaching in the state of Indiana. Rick.
Thank you, Ron. Good morning. Good morning. I'm glad Ron mentioned about turning your cell phones off, because I'm an English teacher and certainly I would not know what to do if a cell phone went off during my teaching. That would be a brand new experience. I feel blessed for a lot of reasons, and one is that Mike gave me this session at 8:20 on a Friday morning, because the people that are here at 8:20 are motivated people. And the older I get, the less time I want to spend with unmotivated people, and the more time I just really appreciate and enjoy being around motivated people. And so I'm thankful for the 8:20 slot, because these are people that I'm just proud to share my time with. I want to start just by saying that last week I got an email from a college coach, from a small coach in Kentucky. And I was really interested in one line of his email. One line of his email said, please tell your, and he was after a certain athlete of ours, but please tell your athlete that we're small enough that we will individualize her training. I really thought about that for a long time. That really bothered me, to be honest with you, because we have what I think would be a big team. And so I think the automatic implication is that if you have a lot of kids, you're not individualizing their training. That if you have a few kids, you do individualize it, and I think that's a misconception from the start. And so, as we talk today, I think that individualization word is really, really important. Most of all, as I've gotten older and my kids have cycled through, that's the way not only you want all your athletes to be coached, but that's the way you'd like your own children to be coached. And I try to think about that a lot, that I'd like to coach each individual as I'd like them to be coached. The second thing I'd like to add is, as an English teacher, I've been to a lot of conferences. That's exciting. And when a bunch of English teachers get around a table at a conference, after they're done complaining about how many papers they graded, how long it takes them, they launch into this one, a round of what's your favorite writing assignment? And everybody takes notes and they all write it down, and I think that has a little bit of value to it, but no writing assignment has any particular value unless it comes within the context of what you're teaching and what you've taught before and after. And I think sometimes when people come to a clinic, it's a little bit of what's your favorite fill in the blank. But remember that anything I might share today must fit in the way that your program runs and fit into what you believe and what you fit in for your philosophy. And so, even though we just have a short time today, I'd like to take just a couple minutes to talk philosophy first. Because anything that I tell you about training has no background or foundation unless we talk about what we believe in and what our runners believe in. And if you are young and haven't thought a lot about that in terms of your program yet, that's my assignment for you on your way home. Think about as you drive home after this conference, what is our philosophy, what do we believe in, and do our kids, do our runners understand that? Anything I might tell you this morning is no good unless your kids will do it. And it's really no good unless we can get them to want to do it. So it's all about building your philosophy first, that pulls them in to want to do every day the training that you present for them. So a couple thoughts about that. And there's a page in there of this because I knew I didn't want to take too much time. But I just wanted to share, we have 3 philosophical statements that lie at the core of everything that we do. And we talk about them almost every day. And we want our runners to be able to recite them on notice. So if the principal grabs a distance runner in the hallway and says, "What's the philosophy of your program?" we want them to be able to tell him the answers, because that becomes the why they want to do this. The 3 statements that work for us are: hard work given time will beat talent, every day is a great day to get better, and to seek excellence you must become an everyday person. So those are the 3 things that we work on. I hope you also notice that I hope they can take those 3 ideas, and even if they never run again after they finish high school, they can still use those philosophical statements in whatever areas they choose to pursue. And so that's a suggestion as we start. As I talk about the specifics of training, those 3 statements have to fall in line. The second thing I wanted to take just a moment to share with you at the beginning is, no matter where you are in your coaching journey, you want to continue to be aware of the question, am I rewarding what I want repeated? And I stumbled on that about a year ago or about 2 years ago, thinking a lot about especially our second 2 philosophical statements. Every day is a great day to get better, and to seek excellence you must become an everyday person. And I realized that our really fast kids, they get a lot of rewards. They get rewards all the time, and some of them are tangible in the form of medals, and some of them are less tangible in the form of publicity. But they get plenty of recognition for being fast. What do I want to reward? I want to reward daily effort. Daily effort. This is going to sound silly, but it's worked really well for us the last 2 years. And so I thought, okay, if we can get some kids to run every day, let's say for 100 days, because that was a nice round number. And that's not easy for a lot of kids. That's about 14 weeks, and so that's at least 14 Sundays that they're not with me. So they're running it on their own at least 14 days in there. And so what do I give them after they've run 100 days? And on my budget, I came up with this. We give them a pencil. And this pencil says on it, I'm an everyday person. And I knew we could afford 9 cents. They're about 9.5 cents if you get them printed. And our middle ground kids have just grasped a hold of this idea and taken it to great places. The last week of cross-country season, I just took a quick poll and I said, how many of you are on your more than 100 days now? And we had 37 kids on our team that had run more than 100 days in a row. And so it doesn't have to be something hugely valuable. It was just a pencil. But the sign for them is, I'm being recognized for doing what you would like me to do, which is devote myself to my goals every day. I want to say this also. I had a chance 2 weeks ago to talk to the track program at Grand Valley State University in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They're ranked number 1 right now in Division II indoor track. And one of their coaches said to me, but we don't necessarily believe our runners should run every day. And when he said that, I knew I hadn't made myself clear. It doesn't matter to me if your runners run every day. We encourage ours to, because not so much that it's not good to take a day off every now and then, but if they get a streak going, it stops them from missing those days when they just don't feel like it and they should be running. Does that make sense? So if they've got a streak going, some Wednesday when they should do the workout, they'll go out and get it done because they've got that going. Well, what I said to them was, it's really not about running. It's really about, as a human being, are you learning to devote yourself every single day to what your goal is? So you can work that into your program with whatever your running philosophy is. But I encourage you to teach them, is there any better lesson to teach young people than become an everyday person? And I just think that's really important. And if a pencil helps do that, they never sharpen them. They keep them. They have them in their backpacks. They kind of stick out of the top of their backpack so everybody knows they got a pencil. Nobody in the rest of the school can figure out why they care. but they care, and they know that they earned it. And so I just wanted to mention that as the beginning of as we do that and talk about that whole process. And one more thing to add to, I keep clicking these and making you crazy, all right? It's okay to wave that and say, here, Coach, put that down. Because I'm old, one of the questions I get most often is, how have kids changed in the last 38 years of coaching? And I would say the number one thing that I tend to answer is, I think kids nowadays need to know why way more than runners did back when I was a runner. When I was a runner and the coach told you to do something, you just did it. And that's how it worked. Nowadays, they want to know why. And I don't say that as a negative, I say that as a positive. I think that's really healthy, because I ought to know why. And so if I don't know why and can't tell them why, then maybe we ought to be doing something different. But as soon as they know why, then they want to do what they're doing. So because I said so, that was my dad's answer. It's not a great answer with today's generation, but here's the reason why we're doing this workout is a great answer, and then they're going to want to do it. And so let's talk a little bit about that as we get into this whole process. I put a question mark with that. What do we all know as we talk about training for the 1600 and the 800? Not because I thought you don't know it, but because the more research I continue to do, the more those answers keep changing. It seems like the physiological research just keeps changing on this whole process. It's hard to get a handle on it. And to be honest with you, the high performance laboratory at Columbus North must be someplace I haven't been able to find yet. And so it's not like I have a lab for us to test these types of things. And so these are the things, that we kind of know. We kind of know that every runner's muscle fiber has some percentage fast twitch and some percentage slow twitch. And that generally, if the runner's muscle fiber has a lot of fast twitch, they've already figured it out, like in middle school, and they want to do the 100. So generally, the athletes that come to the 16 and 8 generally probably have more slow twitch than fast twitch, but I don't know how to measure it because we can't do muscle biopsies. The second thing is, gosh, it used to be that the generally accepted theory was that the 1600 was the perfect middle ground race, that it was 50% aerobic capacity and 50% anaerobic capacity. Well, again, we got no way to test that as you read and read and read and read. The most recent one I saw is they're saying they think that the 800 is now about 69% aerobic capacity, which makes the 800 31% anaerobic capacity. Here's what I know. I know that young runners must develop a huge aerobic oxygen delivery system. So no matter what the event, they have to develop a huge system. So that's going to be part of what we talk about. So as we talk, I'd like to talk about how to develop the aerobic system, the oxygen delivery system, and the anaerobic lactate tolerance system. I'd also like to say this. Mike Coleman stopped in earlier. He was the coach at Lawrence Central. And this is just the world I live in. At Columbus North, if a young man can run a 400 in 54 seconds, at Columbus North, he's in the 400. I know there are schools like Mike's at Lawrence Central. If you run 54, you're bumping to the 8 or maybe the 16. We don't get that many kids that can run a very fast 400. And so as I talk about the 800, I just want to be honest with that, up front, that the times we're able to get a 4x800 to the state meet, it seems like we're one of the few schools that's trying to run cross-country guys in a 4x8, because just by logic, if you can get a pretty fast 400 kid and bump him up till he shocks enough and can run a fast 800, it's a lot easier for him if he can run 51 to run a fast 800 than when I try to get Chase Ballard, who's flat out of 58, to run an 800, but we don't get very many of those situations. We did 3 or 4 years ago when we got the Ocasio, Dean, Kelsey group, and those guys could all run 52, and they could put together a 742 relay. But that's not the world we usually live in. And so, absolutely, if you've got quarter milers that aren't quite making it, bump them up, boys and girls. We just don't get a chance to do that very often. And so, what we must do is concentrate on their ability to deliver oxygen. So here are the phases of our training. And we try to go clear through that whole slide during track season. In cross-country season, this is just a side, this is not the cross-country clinic. But in cross-country season, we get to phase 2, and then we just maximize that throughout the season. Cross-country takes very little lactic tolerance, and the lactic tolerance that it takes, you can develop through hard racing, in my opinion. So in cross-country, we're all about just maintaining oxygen for as long as we can. But track's not like that. Track's fast. Track has more blood lactate tolerance you have to do. And so these are the stages we go through. I put that one up at the top just because I think we all have kids that start there. I call it overcoming inertia. Sir Isaac Newton's theory that a body at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. And so probably the first day of track, you're like me, you're the outside force for some of those kids whose bodies have been at rest for a long time. And so as I show you some numbers and some strategies, absolutely we also have some kids that we just have to get them moving 4 or 5 or 6 days in a row. It's a new thing for them. So start where you are. We have kids all over the spectrum, so start where you are on that process. And then I'd like to show you our 2 phases of how we maximize our ability to deliver oxygen. Some people call that the aerobic system. We call it the oxygen delivery system just because we want that word in our kids' minds. And then I want to show you a little bit about phase 3 and how we do that. And I want it all, I hope, by the time we kind of show you those charts that you have, they can all come across as individualized. How can I do this differently for each kid? How can I measure where each kid's oxygen delivery system is without a lab? How can I measure their fast twitch, slow twitch fiber without a lab? This is how we do it, 60 miles south of here and deep in southern Indiana. So our phase 1 is about developing as big an oxygen delivery system as we can. And during our phase 1, which for right now for all of our kids is now, this is what we're doing now, Thursday is the key day of the week. Thursday is all about running as far as possible that you build up to, as fast as possible that you build up to. And we do that run every Thursday, and we have them take their total time and divide it by how many miles they ran, and that gives them our code name there, pace per mile. So yesterday Elijah Brooks ran, I shouldn't pick this one because I can't do the math, he ran 33:28 or something like that for 6 miles, and so when he got done he reported that, and then he told me whatever that was per mile. To 5:30 something, I think. We also had kids that are at this level that did 2 miles yesterday, and some of them ran 15:10, and so when they reported 2 miles at 15:10, and they did the pace per mile, which is 7:35. And it's all about, during this phase of our season, making that run longer and faster. It's all about that one. The other thing that this run does is it's a character test every week. It's difficult every week. If it weren't difficult, everybody would want to do this, but that's difficult every week. So how do we use the rest of our week around maximizing that workout? Well, there's where it plugs in, or is we plug that in first. And so the kids that are running, the kids that are running 2 miles right now on that day, we'd like them to build up over the next few weeks to run a 3 and then run a 4. And Elijah Brooks, who did a 6 yesterday, we're going to allow him over the next couple weeks to bump up to whatever we think is right for him at his age, or whatever you think your level is. And so how do we make that run longer? If they run that run all out, how do we make it longer? Well, on Monday, we allow them to do a long run at any pace they want to, just so it's nonstop. But we want it to be at least a mile longer than Thursday. And so that establishes their body's ability to replace glycogen enough to replenish their energy stores working toward Thursday. Excuse me. So how do you make Thursday longer? It's not by just bumping up Thursday. You have to give them the skill set, the oxygen delivery set to get there, and that's by using Monday. Non-stop, any pace they want to. On Monday, they don't ever stop, so if you come to a stoplight, you run in place. Just continual movement. Well, how do we make Thursday get faster? If we want Thursday to be as long as possible and as fast as possible, Monday helps make it longer. There's where it plugs in. You've got these charts. And then Saturday helps make it faster. And what we do on Saturday, gosh, I hope I got the words to make this seem logical. If you're running 5 miles for your long run on Monday, how do we get your body capable of running 6 miles for that? Well, we run 6 miles on Saturday, but we allow them to break that up into segments. So 6 miles where you run a little bit, you stop and stretch, you do your drills, finish your running. 6 miles like that enables them to run 5 miles non-stop on Monday, which allows them on Thursday to run 4 miles as hard as they can. So everything has a buffer zone teaching their body to get ready for that Thursday. On Saturday, also typically, we put them on the track or on the sidewalk someplace and we run them for a mile, because running hard for a mile, 5 or 6 or 7, or I'm just like you, we've got a boy that runs 10 minutes and 30 seconds on his mile. They're all ability ranges doing this. And that allows them to get a little bit faster on Thursday. And so that's where that plugs in. So I double clicked on, we lost our Tuesday slide. Again, I think you have this in your notes. Guys, I've been told as a speaker, don't ever tell them what's already written down. But I want to tell you what's there, because what you'll do is go back and take a look at it, because by the time you get done today, your brains are going to be full of all kinds of things. Okay, so you got the Tuesday chart in there. We lost the slide. Mike helped me make that fit on fewer pages, and we lost a slide or two here or there. But let me tell you about Tuesday while we're there. Thank you, Coach. Tuesday is what we call the short pace per mile run. And so Tuesday caps out at 4 miles for everybody, even Elijah Brooks, who may be running a little bit longer than that. And our kids that ran 2 miles on their long day did 1 mile on their Tuesday day. That helps you adapt to the speed of Thursday, while Monday and Saturday allow you to adapt to the length of Thursday. And then you have your other days. This is what we do. Whatever you do fits into your philosophy, because we encourage our kids to run every day. And so those in-between days are opportunities for them to refill their glycogen stores, to get recovered. We're just so, I'm an English teacher, probably this is why, but we're so careful with the language we use. A lot of times people call their workouts hard days and easy days, or fast days and slow days. We try to stay away from anything that's called easy or slow. So we call these days, just because I think language is important, we call them maintenance days. Because if you tell a person, okay, today's your easy day, they have a tendency to think, especially kids, that it's not important. It is still important because it's important for you to recover. It's important for you to rebuild your glycogen stores. It's important for you to open your system up again. And so through the years, we've evolved to call these maintenance days. And so we use Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday for their chance to fill in their overall weekly mileage. If you're a person who doesn't have your people run every day, maybe that's one of the days that you fit in whatever you do in between. Your cross training, or your biking, or your elliptical, or your pool, or those types of things, which allow them to maintain. But I think that maintenance word is really important, because one of the most difficult things about the aerobic system is if you don't use it, you lose it. And that's why we give out pencils. Because if you don't use it, you lose it. If you're a golfer and you, for some reason, have a back condition and you can't golf for 6 months, after a couple rounds, you can be about as good a golfer as you were before. Because golfing is muscle memory. The same thing with free throw shooting. If you're a good free throw shooter, you can take a long time off. You can take 3 years off, and after a little bit of practice, you're back to where you were. If you're a good distance runner, you can take 3 years off, and it's going to take you a long time to get back to where you were, because the oxygen delivery system is not muscle memory, it's development. And so this is all about, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so your really motivated kids will do these types of things. Your really motivated kids will want a pencil, because if they don't run a certain day, they lose it. We have a girl right now, one of our cross-country girls, that's a very good tennis player. And she understands this process. And she's on our varsity in tennis, and she didn't even make our top 12 in cross-country. But she came in 2 days ago and brought me her tennis schedule, and she said, will you build me in workouts throughout the spring, running-wise, around my tennis schedule, because I want to be ready to go when the summer hits, because she gets, if you don't use it, you lose it. Kids will really respond to that, but they need to know why. And so that is how the chart plays out week by week. Somebody doing inertia, gosh, we've got a person right now that's doing a half mile or 3/4 of a mile a day. They're still in the inertia process. Don't forget, you can't necessarily just dip them into this. And you may want to have kids run more than that. You know, all these charts, you're welcome to, think of the right verb, my dad is a math teacher, extrapolate, is that what I want to say? The data. Take the data we have and expand it. You can expand this on the same pattern however you want to. I'm not here to tell you how much to have your people run. Here are some of the thoughts that go with this. Well, one thing is, this really builds the oxygen delivery system. This builds the system. You can see the process every day. It's really motivating, because kids are motivated by numbers. My son ran for us, and then he went on to run in college. And one of his summers during college, about mid-July, I said to him, I said, Dave, do you feel like, are you pretty fit? Are you pretty healthy? And he said, to be honest with you, I don't know. I'm doing what I told every day, but I don't know that I'm getting better. One thing about this whole system that's measured in time is you can see yourself getting better. The other thing I just wanted to share, whoop, I didn't want to do that, did I? Is the bottom line on that. We did our all-out Thursday run of the week last night. We had 48 kids that did it. And the ones that ran 2 or 3 miles stayed at the finish along the sidewalk and lined the sidewalk for the kids that were running more. And everybody cheered as everybody came in. And they even stayed, for Aiden. Aiden ran 3 miles at 10:45 per mile yesterday, but they stayed and cheered for him also. And Thursday becomes...
You did it by yourself, I watched it.
Did you? Okay. I pull a few practical jokes sometimes, so if you're planted here by one of my friends to make this happen, I'm on to it now. Stop doing this. Thursday becomes a really bonding experience, because there's no greater way to improve self-esteem than to watch people meet a challenge. And that's what happens on Thursday, and it's a real team bonding thing, and they were all real excited. They're all nervous before they start on Thursday because they know it's uncomfortable. Just some other thoughts for this, and then I need to move on. And this is really, I think, the most important one to me. We don't start packs of runners on this day. We don't take all the 6 milers and start them together. The way they started was last week on the 5 mile, Elijah Brooks was the fastest, and Eli Fisher was the next one. And a few years ago, Mackenzie Caldwell would have been the next one. But if Elijah beat Eli by 20 seconds last week, we start Eli 20 seconds ahead of him this week. And so the faster you are, the later you start. But what you're doing is you're running down the people. They're running really hard not to get caught. And when you get to the end, it's a whole bunch of them coming down, kicking down together. It's a really neat thing. What we found a long time ago is if we allow them to start together, they tend to just run together, and then they run really hard at the end, and not everybody gets their maximum benefit. Then it's not individualized. Then it's just a group run, and then they kick at the end. We start them all in a big, long line, so it took a while to start, 48 people yesterday. But I think that's important.
Coach?
Yes?
Do you have them like the kids who are running longer start before the kids are only doing 2 miles?
Yes.
Is
Yes.
the goal to have all 48 finish at once?
Yes. And it's a really neat show when that happens. Absolutely. So sometimes we'll hustle up the ones running longer and get them stretched and get them started first, so the other ones don't necessarily have to stand there during that period of time. It's also, excuse me, really helpful, I think, for the younger runners and the runners not running as much to feel like they're in there with the people that are running more, because that's what they want to become. That's who they want to become, and I think that model is really important. And so that's what we call phase 1, and we do it during the summer during cross country, and we do it into September during cross country, because cross country is a different animal. But you didn't come to a session called cross country. So here's what we do with the 16 and 800 guys. And we do that with our 1600 guys, our 800 guys, our 3200 guys. Again, we maybe don't have the luxury that it seems some other schools have. It's not unusual for us to run the same guys that run, or girls that run the 4x8, to come back at the end of the meet and run the 32. I mean, we aren't able to specialize maybe like some of yours are. So they got to deliver oxygen. When do we transition to stage 2? Well, stage 2, we'd like our boys to be at least 7 minutes per mile on that run or faster. The girls at least 8. Even though, to be honest with you, at the end of the season, we kind of convert everybody, because we have some boys that will never get that fast. And we have some girls that will never get that fast. But we transition them anyway. Generally, you'd like to have at least 3 weeks of phase 1. If you can stretch your time capsule, and your kids will do that in the off season, you see it just buys you more time. You can spend more time with it. And then we move to what's called phase 2. We call these our continuous intervals. This is still aerobic. This is all non-stop. So once they start this, they don't stop. And you have, again, good notes on that downloaded and on your paper, and you can reread this. But generally, here's the definition of what we call a continuous interval. A continuous interval is 400 meters run at a designated pace with a 600-meter jog. That's one continuous interval. 400 at pace, 600-meter jog. Generally, that's getting their pulse down to about 120. Then they start on the next one. How do you know what the designated pace is? I put that chart in your packet. So I don't know what one of these necessarily got printed in, but there's going to be a chart with a lot of numbers. It's going to look like that. So it looks like, yeah, straight out of the box, it's maybe the 3rd or 4th page.
This one?
Yes.
It's in the 2-page one.
So the handouts are separate. Okay, so they're two separate handouts. Mike did this for me, I'm really thankful for that. So it's in the second, the smaller handout, the 2-page handout, and it's the beginning of the second page of that. Thank you. And that shows you, that's your copy of our phase 1 week by week. And if you look down at the bottom of that, here's your conversion to phase 2. If they got up to a 3-mile long PPM, then they're going to convert to 4 and 6 of what we call these CIs. If they got to 4, they're going to do 6 and 8. You see how I'm doing that chart right there? Okay. So that establishes their volume. The longer the PPM they do, the more continuous intervals they do. It just makes sense. It's glycogen replenishment. It's also how dedicated they are. If you look clear to...
Does that mean if they did a 3-mile LPPM, they're going to do, their continuous intervals are going to be the 400, 600s? And then,
what that means is we do a high set and a low set. So the first time they do them, they'll do 400s. The second time they do them, they'll do 6 400s.
Okay.
And we do high and low set. I think I have that in the slide, but we haven't gotten to that yet. So if you're in a 4, the first time we do it, they do 6. The second time they do it, they do 8. Okay. If we converted Elijah Brooks right now, the first continuous interval workout we would do would be 8, and the second would be 12. We never do these at longer than 400 meters because it's really hard for kids to recover in a 600-meter jog from a 400 or anything longer than a 400. That's just my experience. How do you decide how fast they go? Okay, you see the chart on the right? So the faster your long PPM, obviously, the faster your continuous intervals are. I'm going to do this. Does that make sense? Just look at your faces. See it on the right there? And that in the far right-hand column, that's in seconds. So somebody that can do a long PPM at 5:20 pace, that's unusual for us. You know, but that's a Seth Williams or a Chase Ballard. Then they can run 68 seconds on their continuous intervals, and after a 600-meter jog, we're pretty sure their pulse is going to be back to 120.
What is it?
Very good. Very good. And we've used this chart for a lot of years, so it's been kind of tweaked. Because I also get questions like, how in the world do you know this? It's just being around a long time and tweaking that. But it depends a little bit on the individual people. And it depends a little bit if you run that continuous interval correctly. It might be the next slide. There it is. We would like them to run as evenly as possible on those continuous intervals. As evenly as possible. So if they're supposed to run 80, we'd like them to come through 20, 40, 60, and 80 to get there. It also teaches kids pace really nicely, especially in track season. Cross country, we do this on grass. In track season, we do it on the track. So it gives them a good idea of pace. So generally, their pulse will come down, but there are times that it won't because they go out too fast on the first one because they're all excited and they're fresh. Also, these intervals don't feel all out. This workout has a cumulative effect. The first 80-second 400 you run doesn't tax you tremendously, and you jog your 600. But the 10th 80-second one you do with a 600 jog, you feel the cumulative effect. And so sometimes, especially our younger kids, overrun it early on. And they're supposed to run 80 and they run 74, and they think, look how good I'm doing, and then they get to number 6. And there's your good question. What do you do then? Because their pulse is way out of proportion at that point. And it tends to happen on your lesser trained athletes. Our veteran, older boys and girls can tolerate making mistakes on this better than our younger ones can. Our younger ones make a little mistake, and then their pulse is way too high. Am I to your question now? Then what do you do? Generally what we do is we stop them. We really want this workout to be what it's called to be. Here, and you want to know why? Because you're the new generation. Why is because as soon as your pulse quits coming down during that time period, you're no longer doing aerobic work, you're now doing anaerobic work. And there's nothing wrong with doing anaerobic work, I just want control of it. And so we want this to be aerobic because we're working for phase 3. He says, looking at his watch to make sure that we get there. And so what we generally do is we stop them and we let them come back the next day and try it again, or sometimes 2 days later and try that again. Again, it's individualized because it comes down to how long has their long PPM been, how fast has it been. But also you understand the responsibility of the runners. They have to have a watch, and they have to be specific in how they check through all this, because I could never be timing all this happening. 48 people ran their long PPM yesterday, I didn't time any. Matter of fact, yesterday I just took a walk and went up and down the course and just cheered for kids as they came by and encouraged them, and I met them at the end with my clipboard, and they all looked at their watches and they read off to me what they did. This is the same kind of thing. They have to become responsible. That's why they have to want to do that.
Are you running on the cross-country course?
We have a really good part north of town that has very little traffic. So yesterday, we've been doing that on the road. Traffic is a problem. Stoplights are a problem in the whole process. And so you can do it that way, but we're lucky to have a place like that.
Do they actually check their pulse?
Question about whether or not they check their pulse, and the answer is yes. The younger ones, again, not very good at it, but you get better at it over time. And so they will check their pulse. Usually they get a feel for it, and after a while as you watch them, you can kind of tell by their breathing where they are after 600 meters. But usually we'll have them check every other time, just to make sure that they're staying in the aerobic capacity part of that. If kids know why, they'll train themselves to do all these kinds of things. And I learned, one of the big, I think, changes in my coaching was when I allowed them to take ownership in a lot of these things. When my son, when he was a freshman, he had his wisdom teeth taken out, and the next morning he came downstairs for school, and he got dizzy, and he fell, and he dropped a drinking glass, and it broke, and he was cut up. And so I had already gone to school, but my wife called the ambulance, and the ambulance came, and they got him, and they patched him up, and they put him on the stretcher, and the ambulance guy said, okay, we got to get a pulse. And so my son, on the stretcher, started to do this, until the ambulance guy said, no, we will do that for you. But that's really kind of what you're hoping for. He didn't know. He thought he was supposed to tell him his pulse. So a lot of this becomes their own ownership. And I think you have all these things in your notes because I want to be sure to get to stage 3, especially with 1600 and 800. So let me just tell you that's there, and let me just say this. We don't change their given pace over the course of the season. So for the continuous intervals, once you get your pace, that's your pace. Well, how does the workout become better? What happens when you get more fit if I don't let you run faster? Here's what we do. They tend to cut the 600 jog to 400 jog. And so they're actually going more often on that. Their jog also speeds up. One of these years, it's not my technological skill, but I'll take a video of this in September, and then I'll show you a video of this workout the week of the state cross-country meet. And you watch them, and it looks like a totally different thing, because by late October, their jog looks like they may still be running with continuous interval. That's how fast some of them get. Like there's very little difference in the pace. At the beginning, it's significant. They run their pace, and it's a light jog as they get back and recover. So we allow them to progress on this, not by the pace of that, because the pace is their aerobic pace. But we allow them to improve on that by letting the jog get faster and the jog get shorter. And then let's talk about phase 3. You've got all these notes too. I'll just show you where they are. But phase 3 is specific work then to help them tolerate blood lactate. Tolerate the things that happen in track when all of a sudden, your body is tense, and sore and tired because you don't have quite enough oxygen to clear the blood lactate. So we do specific work designed for this also. If there are two sides to this, we're leaving phase 1 and phase 2, which some people call aerobic. We're moving to phase 3, which some people call anaerobic. We call them oxygen delivery and lactate training, or oxygen delivery and lactic acid training. And so what we do in this is maybe more what feels like track to you. These are intervals where you run a certain distance, and then you stand there and rest, and then you run a certain distance again, and then you stand there and rest. So everything oxygen delivery related is non-stop. Everything blood lactate tolerance related, you're allowed a standing rest. Because for young people especially, if you jogged on this rest, you couldn't do very many, and then your body would be shot. Take the Ritzenheim and go jog during his lactate rest. Takes a long time. Here's the individualization part of it. This is the last page of your 2-page packet.
What was this?
That's what we're going right here. So we call these pace intervals. So down at the bottom of that page before that, it showed you the volumes of pace interval 200s. The back page shows you the pace. How do you know what pace to give? My wife's here today. If you get a chance, we're at the table down at the end, and she's helping me have some books for sale, and she's a really nice lady. And her one rule in life is, once you get past age 50, you can say whatever you want. And she's not there yet, but I'm well past there. Please tell her I said that about her. And so I'm going to say this because I think this is a huge mistake that a lot of programs make. And if I'm stepping on your toes, you can totally pretend I didn't say this. If a kid doesn't have very much leg speed, they think, I need to make him faster. I'm going to give him more speed training to make him faster. But the reason he doesn't have very much leg speed, or she doesn't have very much leg speed, is her percentage of fast twitch fiber is lower than his percentage. He's fast. So no matter how many times I make this person run fast, it's still training the fast twitch part of that fiber, which is a smaller percentage, and it's going to wear out and get tired sooner. So a Chase Ballard that could barely run 100 in 15 seconds. Over the course of his career, I couldn't do very much about his raw leg speed, but he just couldn't do as fast 200 intervals as a Seth Williams who could run 13 seconds. A Mackenzie Caldwell, who was fast for us, for a girl distance runner, could run about a low 13-second 100, and so she could do her pace intervals much faster than most of our girls are able to do them. And that's because it's based on the percentage of fast twitch and slow twitch fiber you have in that muscle fiber. And so I think a lot of places take their fastest runners, by that I mean they run the best times in the mile, and they put them all in the same training group for this, even though they may have very different amounts of fast twitch and slow twitch fiber. Chase Ballard could run 9:13, and Seth Williams could run 9:13, but they couldn't run that workout together because they had such different fast and slow twitch amount of fiber. As soon as Chase tried to do that, he got injured really fast because we were trying to pound a fiber that wasn't there. And so I just offer that up to you. So how do you know what their percentage is? Again, at Columbus North, we're not allowed to do the jab the needle in and check their muscle fiber count. The only way I know to do it is to take them and have them run 100 and see how fast they are. I mean, that's all I have. I guess that's called a practical lab, if I thought of a good name for that. But we can't do a laboratory thing. We can only have them run 100 and see how fast they are. With distance runners, that's a trick also. Okay. So a couple quick thoughts are in your notes on how to do that. But generally, you got to make sure they're really stretched. Generally, you want to have them really flexible. Generally, they run 100, and it's terrible. And you want them to do another one now that they're kind of really warmed up, but they have to walk at least a lap on the track to get that out of their system, because 100 for most of our distance people, they're shot for like 6 minutes. And so then we let them walk slowly around. They usually run better the second time. So measure that a couple times. They also always think they're faster than they are, and they look at the watch, and it's just what it is. And so, as I'm looking, I have no idea what just happened to that, but Phase 1, PPM program, establishing oxygen. Phase 2, continuous intervals, establishing oxygen. You continue to do those throughout the season. Phase 3 is your pace intervals. Here's another thing we do. I got about 3 minutes left. I'm looking at Ron. That's backwards to what I think a lot of programs do. A lot of programs, I think, start by doing lactate anaerobic intervals of a longer distance, and then as the season goes on, they make them shorter. How am I on that? That's just my observation. We do it the other way. We start with them doing 200s, and as the season progresses, we have them run those longer. So ultimately, we start you running 200s at 31 seconds based on your 100 speed as it shows on this final chart. And as we move up to 300s, we don't want that pace to lag. And so he runs a low set of 200s. A week later, he runs a higher set of 200s. A week after that, we run a low set of 300s. And if you're at 31, we want you to be able to run 46 or 47 on your 300s. So that's how we do it, I think, differently. So rather than starting with, gosh, 600s or 800s that aren't very fast, once we go to this stage, we want to be fast and we want to maximize what you can do. So I think that is in your notes there. Question?
In phase 3, what day of the week would you be?
Okay. Because implied in that question is what happens during track season. All of a sudden, you got meets, and you're working around those, and that's a really good question. That's why the sprint coach always wants a lot of meets, and the distance coach always wants like one meet a week and things like that. For your oxygen delivery work, your kids can race really well within the next day or two. So Valor fits in that. With your pace intervals, your anaerobic work, it usually takes 2 or 3 days before they're ready to race. So that's how I feed that. That's how I feed that in. And then we maintain these things all the way through. Once we start a tool, we keep maintaining the tool.
When do you go to phase 3?
Okay. So how do you know when? Well, when depends a lot on your individual kids, whether or not they started at Inertia, or whether or not maybe you go home and you've got somebody that's ready to roll right now on some of this. We like to have at least 3 weeks on phase 1. We like to have at least 3 weeks on phase 2, and then we can go to our lactic tolerance workouts. We like to have as long as possible on those because we start at 200s. 2 weeks of those, then 2 weeks of 300s, and we love to get them up to 400s a little bit more. Then that workout becomes pretty taxing.
What are your times to separate the fast versus slow performance? What time
I think the best answer I have for that is this chart here. It should be, I think it's the last page of your 2-page packet, and that's just what we use. And so we don't necessarily get a percentage